Lovely. A puss puss. A puss puss. A puss 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 puss.
My son, our enemies grow stronger every day, yet you allow your daughter to dismiss Prince Anders and a possible military alliance.
Which enemies?
Shirabat continues to amass.
Shirabat is our ally.
Was our ally.
You would drag us into war with our
And
oldest...
you would allow your kingdom to sink into ruin for mere sentiment.
Jafar! Remember your place.
I apologize. Forgive me, my son. I went too far. But if you would only reconsider, I think you will see that invading Shirabat is the right thing to do.
Why would we invade Mother's kingdom?
We would never invade Shirabat.
But an ally in Scanlan would improve our situation.
Yes, if you consider giving Prince Anders a chance.
To rule? Baba Raj would make a better ruler.
My dear, I'm not getting any younger. We must find you a husband, and we're running out of kingdoms.
What foreign prince could care for our people as I do? I could lead if
My
only...
dear, you cannot be a sultan, because it has never been done in the 1,000-year history of our kingdom.
I have been preparing for this my whole life. I have read...
Books, but you cannot read experience. Inexperience is dangerous. People left unchecked will revolt. Walls and borders unguarded will be attacked.
Jafar is right. One day,
Words of
you will understand.
Copy that.
You may leave now.
Life will be kinder to you, Princess. Once you accept these traditions and understand it's better for you to be seen and not heard.
Here comes a wave meant to wash me away. The tide that is taking me under. Broken again, left with nothing to say. My voice drowned out in thunder. But I can cry, and I can start to crumble. Whenever they try to shut me or cut me down, I can't stay silent, though they wanna keep me quiet.
vet center seemed like the best bet. I feel finding someone who you're comfortable with is definitely healing and progression. Sperm count. Start treating your body to the natural, nourishing, lathery goodness of Dr. Squatch soap. Get ready to step out of the
تو پوهیږي او که نه زنګ وهه ليش نه پوهیږم پښتو راته ووایه خبرې راولېږه
Go to drsquatch.com to feel, smell, and shower. It's perfect. Big soap cuts corners and strips out all the sudsy goodness in order to make production cheaper. First, I'm going to have you read our competitors. Just go ahead and give that a shot.
Hydrogenated tallow acid,
Pentasodium, pentatene.
Hey Becky, that's your brother. You know who it is.
Dr. Squatch's all natural ingredients.
Pine tar extract, pine oil.
Rosemary, cypress,
oatmeal, sand, and orange essential oil.
sage, lavender essential oil.
Sounds a little bit better. I don't need any extra sauce.
We use a base of olive oil, coconut oil, and shea butter. Then add exfoliants like sea salt, oatmeal, and natural scents like citrus and essential oils. We pour this heavenly mixture into a cauldron so purification takes place. This is the whole process. One like soap. Here comes the milk. Once ready, the soap is instantly scented and shipped right to you. You'll feel like our team is made up of strong dads, sensitive lumberjacks, and buff therapists. It is. Time for you to get the right tool for the job. Because you're worth it, my friend. We ship it right to your door. And with a 100% satisfaction guarantee, if it's not the best bar of soap you've ever used, it's on us.
Why tell me? Why have me click the link? Click the link!
A little conversation, turning into little sweet sensations, and they're only getting sweeter every time. A friendly get together, turning into visions of forever.
I like it how I think I'm crazy.
Perhaps even more importantly, his invention coincided with the birth of a new movement sweeping across Europe.
I am the oldest World II vet.
Enlightened intellectuals used reason to question
I went in the Army
their
in
legacy,
1940.
politics, iconoclastic
Make you more braver.
Echo.
I
Echo.
never do a book when I lost
Echo. 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 Explain enlightenment.
With a gun, you don't see him turn around and go back this way. Make no size with it. He ain't gonna turn around and go back. Originating in France and spreading through
I can put his ears. He ain't gonna go back. So yes, when you go in there, you just say, well, God is like me now. You gotta take care of it. No time to go. What is it? It ain't no time to go. Oh, yeah, hey. It ain't gonna hit.
Echo. 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 Who is Jim Al Kelly? Echo. 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 Who is Nikola Tesla?
Whether you're spicing pizza with Spanish-style chicken and peppers, or putting a fresh spin on a classic favorite with turkey sloppy joes, instant food meals to fill your summer with serious flavor. Make the most of summer at stopandshop.com/recipes.
Echo. Who is Thomas Edison? Echo. What is a Faraday cage? Echo. What is Native American? Echo. Echo. What are the powers of life? Echo. What is the world's most efficient battery? Echo. Echo. What bell is ringing for 100 years?
I get those cats. I tell the truth, they keep me happy. I want to see my cats there. I wake up 1 o'clock, and then wake up at 2.
Echo. Sing a song about giant hogweed. Yes. Yes.
I love milk, fish, corn, soup. I love soup. A lot of people don't like soup. Don't drink milk.
Apps are used
I've been
everywhere
drinking
except
milk.
one. Why is that?
Right all
Echo.
my life.
People love filling out forms.
Ice cream, I eat ice cream.
Echo.
Yellow.
What is the theory of electricity?
But people always buying these black butterfly cars. Anybody like
Apps are used everywhere
Echo.
except one.
Echo.
Because people
Repeat
love
last.
filling out forms.
Echo. Explain the speed of light. Echo. What is the speeds of travel?
singing, I go to church singing.
Echo. How do tides work? Echo. Echo. How do I plan a trip to the moon?
That's right, from your phone and from wherever you are for primary care, urgent care, or mental health.
Yep, we have fun together.
Echo. What are the layers of the sun? Echo. What are the regions of the solar system? Echo. Echo. What are the planets?
I don't know when I'm coming in. I don't know where I'm going.
Echo. Echo. What is the asteroid belt in Marduk? Echo. What are the asteroid belts? Echo. Echo. Tell me about Mercury. Yes.
Are very interesting.
I was troubled by it. I thought, okay, this is going to be.
No sits with me today.
Would you like me to continue?
Yes.
The problem when a father walks out of these
Mercury
people's
rotates in a way
lives
that is unique in the
there's
solar
a
system. It is tidally locked with the sun in a 3 to 2 spin orbit resonance, meaning that relative to the fixed stars, it rotates on its axis exactly 3 times for every 2 revolutions it makes around the sun. As seen from the sun, in a frame of reference that rotates with the orbital motion, it appears to rotate only once every 2 Mercurian years.
Bethlehem
In example, Mercury would therefore see only one day every 2 Mercurian years. Would you like me to keep reading?
Yes.
Mercury's axis has the smallest tilt of any of the solar system's planets. Its orbital eccentricity is the largest of all known planets in the solar system. At perihelion, Mercury's distance from the Sun is only about 2/3 of its distance at aphelion. Mercury's surface appears heavily cratered and is similar in appearance to the Moon's, indicating that it has been geologically inactive for billions of years. Having almost no atmosphere to retain heat, it has surface temperatures that vary by linearly more than on any other planet in the solar system, ranging from 100 K at night to 700 K during the day across the equatorial regions. The polar regions are constantly below 180 K. The planet has no known natural satellites. Would you like me to continue?
Yes.
Two spacecraft have visited Mercury, Marin 10C by in 1974 and 1975, and Messenger, launched in 2004, orbited Mercury over 4,000 times in 4 years before exhausting its fuel and crashing into the planet's surface on April 30, 2015. The Vicky Columbus spacecraft is planned to arrive at Mercury in 2025. Would you like me to keep reading?
Yes.
Section 3, Physical Characteristics. Internal Structure. Mercury appears to have a solid silica crust and mantle overlying a solid, iron sulfide outer core layer, a deeper liquid core layer, and a solid inner core. Would you like me to keep reading?
Yes.
Mercury is one of 4 terrestrial planets in the solar system, and is a rocky body like Earth. It is the smallest planet in the solar system, with an equatorial radius of 2,439.7 kilometers. Mercury is also smaller, albeit more massive, than the largest natural satellites in the solar system, Ganymede and Titan. Mercury consists of approximately 70% metallic and 30% silicate material. Mercury's density is the second highest in the solar system at 5.427 grams/cm, only slightly less than Earth's density of 5.515 grams/cm. With the effect of gravitational compression which is a factored out from both planets, the materials of which Mercury is made would be denser than those of Earth, with an incompressed density of 5.3 grams/cm versus Earth's 4.4 grams/cm. Would you like me to keep reading?
Yes.
Mercury's density can be used to infer details of its inner structure. Although Earth's high density results exclusively from gravitational compression, particularly at the core, Mercury is much smaller and its inner regions are not as compressed. Therefore, so as to have such a high density, its core must be large and rich in iron. Would you like me to keep reading?
Yes.
Geologists estimate that Mercury's core occupies about 55% of its volume. The Earth's proportion is 17%. Research published in 2007 suggests that Mercury has a molten core. Surrounding the core is a 500 to 700 kilometers mantle consisting of silicates. Based on data from the Mariner 10 mission and Earth-based observation, Mercury's crust is estimated to be 35 kilometers thick. One distinctive feature of Mercury's surface is the presence of numerous narrow ridges, extending up to several hundred kilometers in length. It is thought that these were formed as Mercury's core and mantle cooled and contracted at a time when the crust had already solidified. Would you like me to keep reading?
Yes.
Mercury's core has a higher iron content than that of any other major planet in the solar system, and several theories have been proposed to explain this. The most widely accepted theory is that Mercury originally had a metal silicate ratio similar to common chondrite meteorites, thought to be typical of the solar system's rocky matter, and a mass approximately 2.25 times its current mass. Early in the solar system's history, Mercury may have been struck by a planetesimal of approximately 1/6 that mass and several thousand kilometers across. The impact would have stripped away much of the original crust and mantle, leaving the core behind as a relatively major component. A similar process, known as the giant impact hypothesis, has been proposed to explain the formation of the moon. Would you like me to continue?
Yes.
Alternatively, Mercury may have formed from the solar nebula before the sun's energy output had stabilized. It would initially have had twice its present mass, but as the protosun contracted, temperatures near Mercury could have been between 2,500 and 3,500 K and possibly even as high as 10,000 K. Much of Mercury's surface rock could have been vaporized at such temperatures, forming an atmosphere of rock vapor that could have been carried away by the solar wind. Would you like me to keep reading?
Yes.
A third hypothesis proposes that the solar nebula clouds drag on the particles from which Mercury was accreting, which means that lighter particles were lost from the accreting material and not gathered by Mercury. This hypothesis predicts a different surface composition, and there are two space missions testing its observations. Messenger, which ended in 2015, found higher than expected potassium and sulfur levels on the surface, suggesting that the giant impact hypothesis and vaporization of the crust and mantle did not occur because potassium and sulfur would have been driven off by the extreme heat of these events. With the Columbia, which will arrive at Mercury in 2025, will make observations to test this hypothesis. The findings so far would seem to favor the third hypothesis. However, further analysis of the data is needed. Would you like me to continue?
Yes.
Subsection. Physical characteristics. Surface geology. Mercury's surface is similar in appearance to that of the Moon, showing extensive narrow-like zones and heavy cratering, indicating that it has been geologically inactive for billions of years. Because knowledge of Mercury's geology had been based only on the 1975 Mariner 10 flyby and terrestrial observations, it is the least understood of the terrestrial planets. As data from Messenger orbiter are processed, this knowledge will increase. For example, an unusual crater with radiating crust has been discovered by scientists called the Spider. It was later named the Cloud Area. Would you like me to keep reading?
Yes.
Albedo features are areas of massively different reflectivity, as seen by telescopic observation. Mercury has Dorsa, moon-like islands, mantle, carnotula, roof, and barytes. Would you like me to continue?
Yes.
Names for features on Mercury come from a variety of sources. Names coming from people are limited to the deceased. Photos are named for artists, musicians, painters, and authors who have made outstanding and fundamental contributions to their field. Bridges, or Dorsa, are named for scientists who have contributed to the study of Mercury. Depressions or fascia are named for works of architecture. Mantles are named for the word heart in a variety of languages. Plains of Carnotula are named for Mercury in various languages. Escarpments or roofs are named for ships of scientific expeditions. Valleys or valles are named for abandoned cities, towns, or settlements of antiquity. Would you like me to continue?
Yes.
Mercury was heavily bombarded by comets and asteroids during and shortly following its formation 4.6 billion years ago, as well as during a possibly separate subsequent episode called the Low-Heavy Bombardment that ended 3.8 billion years ago. During this period of intense crater formation, Mercury received impact over its entire surface, facilitated by the lack of any atmosphere to flow and pass this area. During this time Mercury was volcanically active, basins such as the Polaris Basin were filled by magma, producing smooth streams similar to the Maria Pond on the Moon. Would you like me to keep reading?
Yes.
Data from the October 2008 flyby of Messenger gave researchers a greater appreciation for the jumbled nature of Mercury's surface. Mercury's surface is more heterogeneous than either Mars's or the Moon's, both of which contain significant structures of similar geology, such as Maria and Chateau. Would you like me to continue?
Yes.
Subsection. Physical characteristics. Surface geology. Impact basins and craters. Craters on Mercury range in diameter from small bowl-shaped cavities to multi-ringed impact basins hundreds of kilometers across. They appear in all shapes of degradation, from relatively fresh road craters to highly degraded crater remnants. Mercurian craters differ subtly from lunar craters in that the area blanketed by the ejecta is much smaller, a consequence of Mercury's stronger surface gravity. According to Yao Rule, each new crater must be named after an artist that was famous for more than 50 years, and dead for more than 3 years, before the date the crater was named. Would you like me to continue?
Yes.
The largest known crater is Coloris Basin, with a diameter of 1,550 kilometers. The impact that created the Coloris Basin is so powerful that it caused lava eruptions and rustic concentric rings of 2 kilometers tall surrounding the impact crater. At the antipode of the Coloris Basin is a large region of unusual, hilly terrain known as the Real Terrains. One hypothesis for its origin is that shock waves generated during the Coloris impact traveled around Mercury, converging at the basin's antipode. The resulting high pressure fractured the surface. Alternatively, it has been suggested that this terrain formed as a result of the convergence of ejecta at this basin's antipode. Would you like me to continue?
Yes.
Overall, about 15 impact basins have been identified on the image part of Mercury. A notable basin is the 400 kilometers wide, multi-ring coastline basin that has an ejecta blanket extending up to 500 kilometers from its rim in a flow that has been filled by smooth grained material. Beethoven Basin has a similar sized ejecta blanket and a 625 kilometers diameter rim. Like the Moon, the surface of Mercury has likely improved the effects of space weathering processes, including solar wind and micrometeorite impacts. Would you like me to continue?
Yes.
Subsection. Physical characteristics. Surface geology. Plains. There are two geologically distinct plains regions on Mercury. Gently rolling, hilly plains in the regions between craters on Mercury's oldest visible surfaces, predating the heavily cratered terrain. These intercrater plains appear to have obliterated many earlier craters, and show a general paucity of smaller craters below about 30 kilometers in diameter. Would you like me to keep reading?
Yes.
Smooth plains are widespread flat areas that fill depressions of various sizes and bear a strong resemblance to the lunar moraine. Notably, they show a wide ring surrounding the Coloris Basin. Unlike lunar moraine, the smooth plains of Mercury have the same albedo as the older intercrater plains. Despite a lack of unequivocally volcanic characteristics, the localization and rounded, low-bit shape of these plains strongly support volcanic origins. All the smooth plains of Mercury formed significantly later than the Coloris Basin, as evidenced by appreciably smaller crater densities than on the Coloris ejecta blanket. The floor of the Coloris Basin is filled by a geologically distinct flat plain, broken up by ridges and fractures in a roughly polygonal pattern. It is not clear whether there are volcanic lavas induced by the impact, or a large sheet of impact melt. Would you like me to keep reading?
Yes.
Subsection. Physical characteristics. Surface geology. Compressional features. One unusual feature of Mercury's surface is the numerous compression flows, or roots, that crisscross the plain. As Mercury's interior cooled, it contracted and its surface began to decline, creating ether ridges and low-grade sparks associated with stress sparks. The sparks can reach lengths of 1,000 kilometers and heights of 3 kilometers. These compressional features can be seen on top of other features, such as craters and smooth plains, indicating they are more recent. Mapping of the features has suggested a total shrinkage of Mercury's radius in the range of 1 to 7 kilometers. Small-scale crests like spikes have been found, tens of meters in height and with lengths in the range of a few km, that appear to be less than 50 million years old, indicating that compression of the interior and consequent surface geological activity continue to the present. Would you like me to keep reading?
Yes.
The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter discovered that similar small crust spikes exist on the Moon. Would you like me to continue?
Yes.
Subsection. Physical characteristics. Surface geology. Volcanology. Images obtained by Messenger have revealed evidence for pyroclastic flows on Mercury from low-profile field volcanoes. Messenger data has helped identify 51 pyroclastic deposits on the surface, where 90% of them are found within impact craters. A study of the degradation state of the impact craters that host pyroclastic deposits suggests that pyroclastic activity occurred on Mercury over a prolonged interval. Would you like me to keep reading?
Yes.
A rimless depression inside the southwest rim of the Polaris Basin consists of an unseen overlapping volcanic vents, each individually up to 8 kilometers in diameter. It is thus a compound volcano. The vent floors are at least 1 kilometer below their brinks and they bear a closer resemblance to volcanic craters sculpted by explosive eruptions and modified by collapse into void spaces created by magma withdrawal back down into ascendant. Scientists did not quantify the age of the volcanic complex system, but reported that it could be of the order of a billion years. Would you like me to continue?
Yes.
Subsection. Physical characteristics. Surface conditions and exosphere. The surface temperature of Mercury ranges from 100 to 700 Kelvin in most extreme places, 0 degrees north, 0 degrees west, or 180 degrees west. It never rises above 180 K at the pole, due to the absence of an atmosphere and a steep temperature gradient between the equator and the poles. The subsolar point reaches about 700 K during perihelion, but only 550 K at aphelion. On the dark side of the planet, temperatures average 110 K. The intensity of sunlight on Mercury's surface ranges between 4.59 and 10.61 times the solar constant. Would you like me to keep reading?
Yes.
Although the daylight temperature at the surface of Mercury is generally extremely high, observations strongly suggest that ice exists on Mercury. The floors of deep craters at the poles are never exposed to direct sunlight, and temperatures will remain below 102 K, far lower than the global average. Water ice strongly reflects radar, and observations by the 70-meter Goldstein solar system radar and the DLO in the early 1990s revealed that there are patches of high radar reflection near the poles. Although Earth was not the only possible cause of these reflective regions, astronomers think it was the most likely. Would you like me to continue?
Yes.
The icy regions are estimated to contain about 10 to 10 kilograms of ice, and may be covered by a layer of regolith that inhibits sublimation. By comparison, the Antarctic ice sheet on Earth has a mass of about 4 times 10 kilograms, and Mars' south polar cap contains about 10 kilograms of water. The origin of the ice on Mercury is not yet known, but the two most likely sources are thermal gassing of water from the planet's interior or deposition by impacts of comets. Would you like me to continue?
Yes.
Mercury is too small and hot for its gravity to retain any significant atmosphere over long periods of time. It does have a tenuous surface bounded exosphere containing hydrogen, helium, oxygen, sodium, calcium, potassium, and others at a surface pressure of less than approximately 0.5 MPa. This exosphere is not stable. Atoms are continuously lost and replenished from a variety of sources. Hydrogen atoms and helium atoms probably come from the solar wind, diffusing into Mercury's magnetosphere before later escaping back into space. Radioactive decay of elements within Mercury crushes another source of helium, as well as sodium and potassium. Messenger found high proportions of calcium, helium, hydroxide, magnesium, oxygen, potassium, silicon, and sodium. Water vapor is present, released by a combination of processes such as atomic splitting of surface, sputtering creating water out of hydrogen from the solar wind and oxygen from rock, and sublimation from reservoirs of water ice in the permanently flattened solar crater. The detection of high amounts of water-related ions like O, and helium was a surprise. Because of the quantities of these ions that were detected in Mercury's space environment, scientists surmised that these molecules were blasted from the surface or exosphere by the solar wind. Would you like me to continue?
Yes.
Sodium, potassium, and calcium were discovered in the atmosphere during the 1980s to 1990s, and are thought to result primarily from the vaporization of surface rocks struck by micrometeorite impacts, including presently from comet impact. In 2008, magnesium was discovered by Messenger. Studies indicate that, at times, sodium emissions are localized at points that correspond to the planet's magnetic pole. This would indicate an interaction between the magnetosphere and the planet's surface. Would you like me to continue?
Yes.
On November 29, 2012, NASA confirmed that images from Messenger had detected that craters at the North Pole contain water ice. Messenger's principal investigator Sam Solomon quoted in the New York Times estimating the volume of the ice to be large enough to encase Washington, D.C. in a frozen glass 2.5 miles deep. Would you like me to keep reading?
You're with your family.
Yes.
A woman giving a heart at the
Subsection. Physical characteristics. Magnetic field and magnetosphere. Despite its small size and slow 59
Good morning. At the National Park Service program that on
You might be entitled to financial compensation.
According to measurements taken by man and Penn, it is about 1.1% expansive Earth. The magnetic field strength at Mercury's equator is about 200 MP. Like that of Earth, Mercury's magnetic field is bipolar. Unlike Earth, Mercury's poles are nearly aligned with the planet's twin axis. Measurements from both the Mariana and Messenger space probes have indicated that the strength and shape of the magnetic field are stable. Would you like me to keep reading?
Yes.
It is likely that this magnetic
Russian
field
opposition
is
leader
generated by
Alex
a
Navalny is in the hospital after a suspected poisoning. He's then held. Looking at Boise, the video I'll play because he is a critical. I love Frozen.
Then your family's playing. Of course, we have bad. And then we have into the southeast as well as the Great Lakes into the Midwest. And then on Saturday,
Yes.
back toward Minnesota into Wisconsin.
The inspirational woman giving a heart to someone who seems angry at her. And I think that's the most important form of kindness. I think that's the most difficult to give out, but I think those people need kindness the most.
For you, I know that there's a possibility of a $30,000 scholarship. I mean, what are your plans if you were to get the award?
Right now, in terms of colleges, I'm looking at Loyola. I'm also looking at the Art Institute in Chicago. But if I win $30,000 in that, I feel like that opens me
Yes.
to like a whole lot more colleges that, you know, are so out of my pay range. But if I place in my age range, then I become a national finalist. And then from that point, the Google execs choose the national winner to win the $30,000.
How do you feel?
I feel overwhelmed, like a good kind of overwhelmed, but like I'm like a high school student. I'm trying to keep up with people DMing me on Twitter, and I'm trying to start to like sell my artwork to the people who want to see it. So yeah, I feel like I feel really busy this week. It's a busy week. I want to be that point of inspiration, and I know I have those points of inspiration in my life. And yeah, I would love to be like someone that like a black kid could look up to and be like, oh, she won this thing, so I can
Yes.
definitely do it. You know.
Former Vice President Joe Biden accepted his party's nomination for president, culminating a week of a convention that was unlike any other. Nadia Romero has the highlights. Speech coming at the lives and livelihood. Home that now is the time for action.
This is our moment. This is our mission. May history be able to say that the end of this chapter of American darkness began here, tonight. As love and hope and light join in the battle for the soul of the nation.
President Donald Trump spent the day near Joe Biden's hometown of Scranton, Pennsylvania, where he was born before his family moved here to Wilmington, Delaware, trolling Joe Biden and trying to take away the spotlight. And of course, he's taken to Twitter to talk about his disapproval of Joe Biden, but the night still belongs to Joseph R. Biden, officially accepting the nomination and beginning his campaign trail to November. In Wilmington, Delaware, I'm Nadia Romero.
Next, communication amid this pandemic just got a little easier. The
Yes.
transparent face mask has been approved. And doctors are discovering new symptoms in COVID-19 long hauler patients. Those details are next on VNC 24/7. And this is a live look in at Boise, Idaho. The sun isn't shining, but that's okay because we got a lot of bright things on VNC 24/7. We'll be
Yes.
right back.
Mercury's actual tilt is almost zero, with the best measured value of low of 0.0
there's Alien. Everybody's getting ready for a special celebration, and you're invited to join the fun. Happy birthday! Kids and family is turning 1. Celebrate in style with all your friends. And meet some
Yes.
new ones. Be there for the biggest birthday bash of them all. Kids and family on the Roku channel.
Still driving the old model, huh?
I've been looking, but
Just need someone to tell me what a good price is. Just use Auto Trader. It's the only one with Kelly Blue Book. It tells you if the price is good.
you know, some people say,
Nerds drink Diet Coke.
you want to talk nerds? Let's talk nerds. It wasn't always their day. Laughed at for what they love, their clubs and extracurricular activities. But it turns out those nerds are the ones who feed the things that solve
As Doc asks.
myalgia, encephalitis. It's a fancy way of saying chronic fatigue syndrome.
And doctors say some patients experience the symptoms
Yes.
of these conditions even after fighting off COVID-19. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 35% of the people in a monitored group recovering from COVID reported they were continually dealing with fatigue. So short of breath, coughing, just the fatigue and dizziness, headaches almost daily. It's almost like somebody hit you in the head.
Less than a year into the novel coronavirus pandemic, experts admit they're still learning about the effects of the virus both physically and mentally.
This virus, when first advertised, when we first heard about it coming out of Wuhan in China, we have very much focused on this is a respiratory illness. Now we recognize that it's far more complex than that. I got brain fog that won't go away. I've got an onset of clinical depression. I can't control it. I can't control my mood.
U.S. researchers plan to study more COVID patients to determine whether there's a link between the virus and chronic conditions like CFS.
90 degrees of longitude apart from the first one, where the sun passes overhead only when the planet is at a period in alternate years.
Parents will have an easier time getting vaccinations for their children. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has expanded access to childhood vaccines during this pandemic. HHS now allows pharmacists in every state to give vaccines to kids over the age of 3. The pharmacists must have a state license. Officials hope this will lead to more children getting vaccinated. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported orders for childhood vaccines fell sharply at the peak of the pandemic in early spring. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has given the okay for the world's first fully transparent surgical mask. They're made by Clear Mask, an American medical supply company. Traditional surgical masks block mouths, which can sometimes affect communication. The company says Clear Mask helps improve that visual communication, while
Visit standforsmall.com to help. We're proud to support small business owners through this unprecedented time. And whatever comes next. Visit standforsmall.com to help your small business get back to business.
all have something in our closet.
Yes.
Jeans you don't love? Sneakers not your style anymore? Jacket that's just not your color? Well, on Poshmark, you can put them up for sale in seconds. Just take a photo, set your price, and turn your closet into cash. Plus, you can use the money you make to buy yourself that new outfit you've been eyeing. Cash it on your closet and join the fun. Download the free Poshmark app and get $5 off your first order when you use the code LOVEPOSH.
In 1850, a promise was made to back you during times of plenty. And during times like this, that promise still stands. At American Express, we're proud to support small business owners through this unprecedented time. And whatever comes next. Visit standforsmall.com to help your small business get back to business.
However, the messenger project uses an untargeted convention. Would you like me to continue?
Yes.
Subsections: orbit, rotation, and longitude.
Boss.
In-orbit revenue.
Finding purpose in the darkness and inspiring others along the way to do so as well. And I can speak from experience because when my husband unexpectedly died at the age of 52, it was Joe Biden who found me in a hospital and called
A bunch of people who have the heart and the experience this country needs against the person who has neither. And that lack of heart that we feel, the missing empathy from the White House, is literally killing people. And that lack of experience
Yes.
of how to govern, how to unite a country and steer it through crisis is literally killing people. And when it's not killing them, it's killing their livelihoods. It's killing our promise. It's killing our reputation. So what we have with Donald Trump is a broken promise. And what you have with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris is a representation of America's promise. And you're going to see that today. You're going to feel it just as we did yesterday. We're unapologetically. We brought every voice forward. I had the same chills when Kamala Harris, a dear friend, a Californian, and I'll just have to say this, even though she was born in Oakland and represented San Francisco.
Yes.
Sense to marry a Los Angeles boy who's registered to vote here, so Angelino on the ticket. At a Californian for the first time in nearly 40 years. Lisa and I represent this California and Delaware marriage that I think is going to, from the West Coast to the East Coast and the heartland in between, turn this country around. But we know the two of them are the very best of America. I felt that. But I also felt it from everyday Americans. And some who this president said, we can't call Americans when we know they are. People like Jessica Sanchez in a wheelchair talking about what she wanted to do
Yes.
for her country, overcoming her own physical disabilities, her own incredible story, and the love of a mother who wanted her just to survive, like my great-grandmother did with my own grandfather when he lost his father in the Mexican Revolution and carried him over the border, because that's what mothers do, and that's exactly what she said when she said those words. I felt that it was my story. The same way that Lisa heard her story, and the Voice of America is hearing their story. When we heard that letter from a
Someone tell me what
Maximo,
You don't throw a whole life away just because you banged up a little.
Yes.
Numerical simulations show that a future spectral orbital resonant perihelion interaction with Jupiter may cause the eccentricity of Mercury's orbital increase.
I've been looking, but
I just need someone to tell me what a good price is. Just use Auto Trader. It's the only one with Kelly Blue Book.
Yes.
If the price is good.
Subsection. Orbit,
Facing
rotation,
pressure
and
anxiety is tough,
altitude,
but getting help shouldn't be. Here's how simple it can be.
Want to bring it back. And that's all we have for this, because I said so.
You copied her genes.
Around the sun could not be completely explained by Newtonian mechanics and perturbations by the known planets. He suggested a non-possible explanation.
I've had a lot of time to think about what's important to me. I guess I'm choosing more thoughtfully these days. Have you ever used a dating app before? Great match.
Of the orbit of Uranus led astronomers to place faith in this possible explanation, and the hypothetical planet was named Vulcan, but no such planet was ever found. Would you like me to
Good
take
morning.
a
Thanks for joining us. I'm
Yes.
Elizabeth, and this is BNC 24/7. In our top story this morning, former Vice President Joe Biden taken to Twitter to talk about President Trump appealed it. The president is trying to stop the subpoena from being enforced next.
Saying his changes could hamper mail-in voting in November during a pandemic. The president has repeatedly made unfounded fraud claims about it.
And
during times,
the
promise was made
to back
you during times of plenty.
Contest for the soul
of the nation.
And arguing he can best lead the nation.
Hasn't grown into the job because it can't.
Residents who fought in self-defense to protect their property and themselves were attacked.
Faster recently, I think.
Mr. Progressive and you family. Your internet and wireless should always have you covered. Coast with Xfinity Mobile. And the savings, we've got you covered there too. Save up to $400 a year on your wireless bill. Now that's simple, easy, awesome. So get a great offer on Xfinity Internet.
Yes.
Xfinity Mobile to save your first year compared to Fios advertised bundle.
To the kamikaze has a beeline Saturday.
The semi-major axis and the orbital period.
money.
Filling
Can I get a
as a result
why?
of 0.10
Well,
arcseconds per
I can
revolution
only,
is 0.4297 arcseconds per Earth year, i.e., 42.97 arcseconds per century.
money.
This is
Can I get a
incorporated with the expected
why?
value of Mercury's
Well,
perihelion advance of
I can
42.98
only,
arcseconds per century.
what you
Would you
got?
like
What
me
you
to
got?
continue?
Well,
Yes.
I'm hoping like, oh, get out.
Section
That
4.
might win.
Biological
I hold a seat
considerations.
in Congress that Mike
Habitability.
used to have
There may be scientific support
before
based on
Bill
studies
Clinton
reported in
appointed him
March
Secretary of
2020 for
Agriculture.
considering that parts of
I
the
have a
planet
Democrat
Mercury may have been
history.
habitable,
He will
and
get
perhaps that life
one
forms,
heck of a vote
albeit
out of
likely
my
primitive
district. But there are
microorganisms,
three other
may have
districts
existed on the
in the
planet.
state that he
Would you
needs
like
to
me to
get
keep
a
reading?
reasonable
Yes.
percentage of votes also.
Section 5.
But you got to work it.
Observation. Mercury's apparent magnitude is calculated to vary between -2.4 Eidolons
President Trump's former advisor Steve Bannon is now facing federal fraud charges in an alleged scam involving a fundraising campaign for the U.S.-Mexico border wall. Camila Burnell has the latest.
The mean apparent magnitude of
President Trump's former campaign advisor, Steve Bannon, leaving a courthouse after posting bond for federal fraud charges.
complicated by its proximity to the sun, as it is lost in the sun's glare for much of the time.
Bannon and three others were indicted for allegedly using hundreds of thousands of dollars donated to an online fundraising
Yes.
called We Built the Wall for their own personal expenses, including cosmetic surgery, a golf cart, and payments for a boat. In his first court appearance, he pleaded
Yes.
not guilty.
Well, I feel very badly. I haven't been dealing with him for a long period of time.
President Trump says he knew nothing about the border wall fundraising project and did not know the bull involved with it, even though some of his key allies are on its board.
I think I let my opinion be very strongly stated at the time. I didn't like it. It was showboating and maybe looking
Yes.
but you'll have to see what happens. I think it's a very sad thing.
President Trump's 2020 opponents in the Biden-Harris campaign weighing in and highlighting Bannon's ties to the president.
Is it really any surprise that yet another one of the grifters he surrounded himself with and placed in the highest levels of government was just indicted? Sadly, it is not.
Bannon will have supervision and travel.
Yes.
The terms of his bond are due next month. The Justice Department is asking the U.S. Supreme Court to allow President Trump to block his critics on Twitter. Two lower courts ruled that him blocking critics violates the First Amendment because parts of the account serve as a public forum. The matter came before the nation's highest court Thursday. Trump has taken an opposing view on Twitter censorship in the past when he thought the platform was censoring him. The Washington NFL team is gearing up for another season, this time in the middle of a pandemic. But that's not the only challenge they faced as of late. As the organization rebrands its identity, it has hired a new team president,
Yes.
and he just so happens to be making history. VNC's Ashley Liotis tells us more.
Jason Wright used to play football. Now, he's a businessman. So when the chance arose for his two worlds to collide, it was a match made in football heaven.
I'm attracted to challenges that have broad-based impact. Impact that has multiple levels and goes beyond the four walls of the corporation. And so this was incredibly exciting.
Jason Wright made history this week, becoming the first
Yes.
black president of an NFL team, a role he doesn't take lightly.
The first is not because of me, but because of all the people that came before that put crap in the proverbial glass ceiling. Secondarily, I think it's important because 70% of the players on the field are black, and it's important to demonstrate for my fellow former players and to broader society that black talent is welcome and effective beyond the lines of the field.
Wright joined the organization at a challenging time. Not only is the Washington football team dealing with a global pandemic, the group
Yes.
is in the midst of rebranding its identity, starting with a new name and shifting its culture after serious allegations of sexual harassment.
I was really confident in taking this role because of the shared values with Dan and Tanya Snyder, not just in word, but in deed. They brought in an independent investigator to look into these allegations. It's a big step. It's letting somebody in your house, looking under the beds and overturning the carpets and seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's going to give us a very
Yes.
and raw
starting point, and I don't know where that starting point is until I join and I can get underneath that data, but I know where we're going to go. We're going to move to a culture where people are empowered to lift their voice when they see leadership that doesn't align with our values.
Getting to this point came with its fair share of obstacles, but with each new chapter, a character-building moment. Most recently, playing in the NFL, where Wright spent 7 years bouncing from team to team. It was that time of uncertainty where he became a better leader.
For me, it was
Yes.
to learn how to be resourceful, to learn how to live humbly, but also how to reestablish my confidence in the face of a setback.
But perhaps the most influential
Yes.
and character-building mentor he's had is Dad, who he calls his rock.
My dad was my coach. My fondest memories are sort of being outside in the SoCal heat, training with my dad, running up and down hills.
Yes.
And my dad did something, really interesting with our football team. He sort of drove around the area, especially in communities of color or communities that were under-resourced, and found
Closed captioning will compensate. What about her ability to
Here, once you receive them, we'll have a call.
just you and me, huh?
Nope, just you. 7 hundreds of people facing. Thank you.
Types of events throughout. Types of events throughout.
Says the city has been especially hard hit
Yes.
by the COVID-19, rising rents, and
Keto is simple. By removing carbs, your body is forced to burn fat.
twinsies. Well, for example, 7% of those that create the inequalities.
And here is
Personally and professionally, and I'm saying in a history class in the future.
The simplest full page from the finalists were supposed to be announced. But just last week, Google had delivered a box to me saying
Yes.
that I had won Louisiana and that I was in the running for the big win, basically.
How did you feel when you found out that news?
Yeah, it was. It still feels surreal. I mean, it doesn't feel real. Even when I get support like on social media, even that doesn't really feel real.
Let's talk
Yes.
about the actual drawing. Tell me where your inspiration came from. I mean, how long did it take?
Planning always takes the longest. I feel like the whole month of March I was Googling like what kindness means and like the different definitions. And the most of the inspiration was me thinking about how people can be kind even when they don't have anything. So the free options of kindness and also the simplest form. So with the first D, there's mother, her child, most natural form of love. And that's when you're with your family, you're always kind to them
Yes.
in some way or another. And then with one of the O's, it's like a lady hugging a man and he's crying. And I think when you show love to people who don't seem like they love themselves, like that's a really powerful form of kindness. And with second G, it was a woman giving a heart to someone who seems angry at her. And I think that's the most important form of kindness. I think that's the most difficult to give out, but I think those people need kindness the most.
For you, I know that there's a possibility of a $30,000 scholarship. I mean, what are
Yes.
your plans if you were to get the award?
Right now, in terms of colleges, I'm looking at Loyola. I'm also looking at the Art Institute in Chicago. But if I win $30,000, and that I feel like that opens me up to like a whole lot more colleges that are so out of my pay range. But if
Yes.
I place in my age range, then I become to win the $30,000.
How do you feel?
I feel overwhelmed, like a good kind of overwhelmed, but like I'm like a high school student. I'm trying to keep up.
Pierre Gassendi made the first telescopic observations of the transit of a planet across the sun when he saw a
People want to
transit of
see it.
Mercury predicted by Johannes
So
Kepler.
yeah, I feel like
In
I'm feeling really
1639,
busy this week. It's a
Giovanni
busy
Ricci
week.
used a telescope
Like
to
people,
discover
I
that
want
the
to be
planet
that
had
point of
orbital faces
inspiration,
similar to
and I know I
Venus and
have
the
those
Moon.
points of
The
inspiration in my life.
observation
And yeah, I would
demonstrated
love to
conclusively that
be
Mercury
like
orbited
someone
around the
that like
sun.
a black kid could look up
Would
to
you
and
like
be
me to
like, oh, she
continue?
won this thing, so I can
Yes.
definitely do it. You know.
A rare event in astronomy is the
Well, I'll
passage
tell
of
you,
one
she is
planet instead of
going
another,
places, and
as
she is
seen from
very
Earth.
talented. I'm
Mercury
so
and
glad I
Venus
got the
approach
chance
each other
to
every
speak to
2
her.
centuries.
Today's
In
the
the
last
event
day
of
to
May
vote, so
28,
if you can, go ahead and
1737, the
go on that
Orion
Google Doodle
instrument
link and be
appeared,
able to go ahead
having
and
been
vote for
seen
her
by John
under
Davis at the
Louisiana.
Royal Greenwich Observatory. The next occultation of Mercury by Venus will be on December 3rd,
I've always had a problem.
2143.
Still driving the old
Would you
model,
like me
huh?
to
I've been
continue?
looking, but I just need
Yes.
someone to tell me what a good price is.
The difficulties inherent in
Just
observing
use Auto
Mercury mean that
Trader.
it has
It's
been
the
far less
only one
studied
with
than the
Kelly
other
Blue
planets.
Book. It tells you
In
if the price is
1800, Johann Schroeder made observations of surface
If
features,
you do one good
claiming to
thing,
have
you can
observed
inspire
20
another
kilometer high
until good
mountains.
is being spread by
Schroeder
everyone all
calculated
over.
Schroeder's
So
drawings
make a
to
donation
erroneously
and make a
estimate the
difference.
rotation
Then invite
period
your
as
friends to
24
join.
hours on an
Download the
axial
Inlu
tilt of
app to
70
spread
degrees.
goodness and donate on
In the
behalf of others to
1880s,
any nonprofit.
Giovanni
Inlu.
Schiaparelli mapped the planet more accurately and suggested that Mercury's rotational period was 88 days, the same as its orbital period due to tidal
Alexa,
losses.
check it
This
out.
phenomenon
Alexa,
is
turn on the
known as
outdoor lights.
synchronous rotation.
Okay,
The effort to map the surface of
that's
Mercury
cool,
was
but I'm
continued by
pretty sure
Eugenio
to do it.
Clearly
D'Antoniadi,
an
who
Alexa.
published a
Alexa,
book
get
in
directions to the AT&T
1934 that
grill.
included both maps and his own observations.
It's a Buick.
Many of the
Alexa,
planet's surface
Buick.
features,
first ever
particularly the
Buick.4 GX,
albedo
available
feature,
with Alexa
took
built
their
in.
names from Antoniadi's map. Would you like
So
me to
Alexa,
continue?
If you do
Yes.
one good thing, you can inspire another
In
until
June
good is being spread by
1962,
everyone all over.
Soviet scientists
So
at
make
the
a donation
Institute of
and
Radio
make a difference.
Engineering and
Then invite your
Electronics of
friends
the
to join.
USSR Academy
Download
of
the Inlu app to
Sciences,
spread
led
goodness
by
and donate
Vladimir
on behalf of
Kopernikov,
others to any
became the first
nonprofit.
to bounce a
Inlu.
radar signal off
If you
Mercury
do
and
one good
receive
thing,
it,
you can
starting
inspire
radar
another
observations
until
of the
good is being
planet.
spread by everyone
2
all
years
over.
later,
So
radar
make a donation
observations by
and make a
American
difference.
Gordon
Then
H.
invite your
Cuttinger
friends
in
to
West
join.
Point,
Download the
using
Inlu
the
app to spread
300-meter
goodness and donate
Arecibo
on behalf of
observatory
others to
radio
any
telescope in
nonprofit.
Puerto
Inlu.
Rico, showed
There are a lot of
conclusively
things
that the
spreading
planet's
these days.
rotational period was
Fear,
about 59
despair,
days.
something called
The theory that
aerosols.
Mercury's
There's something
rotation
better
is
that we can
synchronous has
spread
become
even
widely
faster.
held, and it was a
Goodness.
surprise to
Goodness is
astronomers who use
contagious.
radio
If you do
observations
one
for
good thing,
news.
you can inspire
If
another
Mercury
until
was
good is
heavily
being spread
lost,
by everyone
its dark
all
point
over.
would be extremely
So make a
cold,
donation
but
and make a
measurements of
difference.
radio
Then
emission
invite your
revealed that
friends
it
to
was much
join.
hotter than expected.
Together we can spread goodness
Astronomers were
everywhere.
reluctant to
Isn't
drop
that
the
great?
synchronous rotation
Download the
theory
Inlu
and
app to spread
proposed
goodness and
alternative
donate on behalf
mechanisms
of
such
others
as
to any
powerful heat
nonprofit.
distributing rings to
Inlu.
explain the observations. Would you like me to continue?
Yes.
Italian astronomer Giuseppe Colombo noted that the rotation value was about 2/3 of Mercury's
Good
orbital
morning. Thank
period,
you for joining
and
us this
proposed that
morning.
the
I'm
planet's
Ashley
orbiter
Fletton.
and
This is
rotational
BNC
periods will all come to a
24/7.
freeze of 2
In
rather
our
than
top
1
story
to 1
this
resonance.
morning,
Data from Mariner 10 subsequently confirmed this
Joe
claim.
Biden accepts
This
his
news
party's
left
nomination for
Schiaparelli's and
rebuke
Antoniadi's
of
maps
Biden
were not
believing of
wrong.
Pennsylvania, where there's a
Instead,
possibility
the
that the
astronomers
tax
saw the same
we
features during
publicly
every second
Bend it over
orbit
to
and
the only way they're
reported them,
gonna
but
thing being
disregarded their
set of
theme in the
course.
meantime, when Mercury's other face was toward the sun, because the orbital geometry meant that these observations were made under poor viewing conditions.
Well,
Would you like me to
for
keep
us,
reading?
we
Yes.
see it at the moment. It's not going to be pretty for us, our families, our businesses.
Like the majority of low-wage workers, Traverse's employees don't have the option of working from home, as most high-wage earners do.
We sell an experience, it's an experience of visiting their restaurant, and we can't package that up and put it in the car.
That simple difference has dramatically slowed low-wage job recovery.
High-wage workers are essentially back to the employment levels that they were in February and March, whereas low-wage workers are still only half recovered.
White workers gained back nearly twice as many jobs lost as black workers during the pandemic. Latinos also trail white workers in jobs recovered. Lucy Joseph was terminated from her job as a gas station cashier in Florida in June after she recovered from COVID-19. She says she was making $13 an hour.
my world
Yes.
is upside down.
It's like a knife put through my heart.
She says she's barely getting by on unemployment while she looks for a new job.
We'll have some stuff.
Verizon knows how to build unlimited right. Start with America's most awarded network.
I'm on my phone 24/7.
Then, for the first time ever, give families more entertainment with Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus, now all included.
We're a big soccer family.
I'm independently wealthy.
You can get round-the-clock protection.
I have a bodyguard.
Okay, this is totally unrealistic.
Well, you weren't really selling it.
Yeah, it was really bad.
Okay, I can do better.
Yes.
Hey, my name is Jamie, and I'm here to say,
Moving down the sun, potential well becomes kinetic energy, requiring another large delta V change to do anything other than rapidly pass by Mercury. To land safely or enter a stable orbit, the spacecraft would rely entirely on rocket motors. Aero braking is ruled out because Mercury
Why
has a
build a new
negligible
high
atmosphere.
tensile steel chassis just to lower the driving position 10 millimeters? Because when you're crafting the form, no measure is too extreme. The Lexus LC and LC Hybrid. Experience amazing at your Lexus dealer.
Apps are used everywhere. Why is that? Is it because people love
Yes.
filling out forms? Maybe they like checking with their supervisor to see how much vacation time they have. Sending
Mariner 10.
their expense
The first
reports?
spacecraft to visit
I'll let you
Mercury
in on a
was
little
NASA's
secret.
Mariner 10.
They don't.
The spacecraft
By
used the
empowering
gravity of
employees
Venus
to
to
manage
adjust
your
its
own
orbital
tasks,
velocity.
Paycom frees you to focus on the business of move over. BNC Stillwater's got a chance to speak to federal fraud charges in an alleged scam involving a fundraising campaign.
And a little
Which immediately showed its heavily cratered nature and revealed many other types of geological features, such as the giant scarps that were later
and both
ascribed
of
to the
these are
effect of the
retesting
planet
this
shrinking
as
slightly as its iron core cooled.
tried.
Unfortunately, the same face of the planet was riddled with submarine 10 close approaches. This made close observation of both sides of the planet impossible, and resulted in the mapping of less than 45% of the planet's surface.
An Arab
Would you like me to continue?
Yes.
No adjustment or calibration is required in between. We provide a guarantee looking at the center has a more
Raising your pressure anxiety is tough, but getting help shouldn't be.
economy. Skin is pale white and ice cold.
Say it.
Vampire.
He didn't want you anymore.
I have to go.
Get ready. They're coming for Bella. I'll do whatever it
Yes.
takes to make you safe again.
So it's nothing short than a moral
Yes.
abomination that in the wealthiest nation in the world, we have to be faced with and see so many struggling so profoundly with economic injustice every day. As our dear friend and great leader Bishop Barber has noted, before the pandemic began, there were over 140 million, mind you, 140 million poor and low-wealth people struggling just to survive, mind you, not thrive, just to survive in this nation. Let me just give you a couple of statistics that I think really highlight why this is so critical. When you look at communities of color, for example, you look at how, let me just read this to you real quick. Poverty affects millions of Americans of all races, ethnicities, abilities, status, and as incredible as their white counterparts. As incredible debt relief bill closes security for a night
At the mass.
Yes.
We won't reopen.
The mission was designed to clear up 6 key issues: Mercury's high density, its geological history, the nature of its magnetic field, the structure of its core, whether it has outside its poles, and where its tenuous atmosphere comes from. To this end, the close-period imaging devices that gathered much higher resolution images of much more of Mercury than Mariner 10, element in the
He
sun.
thought about
A
1980
magnetometer
were
is a
united
device
front.
used to measure velocities of charged particles. Measurements of changes in the probe's orbital velocity are expected to be used to
Of
infer
Scranton,
details of the
Pennsylvania, where
planet's
he was
lunar
born before
structure.
his family moved here to
Messenger's
Wilmington,
solar movie was
Delaware.
on April
I
24,
tried to take
2016,
away the
and it
spotlight,
crashed into
and of
Mercury's
course he's
surface on
taken
April
Twitter to
30,
prove
2016. The spacecraft's impact with Mercury occurred near 3:26 p.m. EDT on April 30, 2016, leaving a crater estimated to be 16 meters in diameter. Would you like me to continue?
Yes.
Subsection. Observation history. Research the spacecraft. Vicky Colombo. The European Space Agency and the Japanese Space Agency developed and launched a joint mission called Vicky Colombo, which will orbit Mercury with two probes, one to map the planet and the other to study its magnetosphere. Launched on October 20, 2018, Vicky Colombo is expected to reach Mercury in 2025. It will release a magnetometer probe into an elliptical orbit, then chemical rockets will fire to deposit the massive probe into a circular orbit. Both probes will operate for one terrestrial year. The massive probe carries an array of spectrometers similar to those on Messenger, and will study the planet at many different wavelengths, including infrared, ultraviolet, X-ray and gamma ray. That's all I have on this topic from Wikipedia.
Echo, can you explain Venus?
As a noun, he is usually defined as an Aquarius party, or, alternatively, the syllable naming the first, planet, noted on the major scale in promulgation. As a verb, he can mean engage in.
Echo, can you explain the planet Venus?
According to Wikipedia, Venus is the second planet from the Sun. It is named after the Roman goddess of love and beauty. As the second brightest natural object in the night sky after the moon, Venus can cast shadows and can be, on rare occasions, visible to the naked eye in broad daylight. Venus lies within Earth's orbit, and so never appears to venture far from the Sun, either setting in the west just after dusk or rising in the east a bit before dawn.
Yes. Echo, explain detail on Venus.
According to Wikipedia, the anus is an opening at the opposite end of an animal's digestive tract from the mouth. Its function is to control the expulsion of feces, the residual semi-solid waste that remains after food digestion, which, depending on the type of animal, includes matter which the animal cannot digest, such as bones, food material after the nutrients have been extracted, for example cellulose or lignin, ingested matter which would be toxic if it remained in the digestive tract, and blood or excess fat bacteria and other endosymbionts.
Echo, explain the powers of Venus.
The answer is desire.
Echo, explain everything about Venus.
According to Wikipedia, Venus is the second planet from the Sun. It is named after the Roman goddess of love and beauty. As the second brightest natural object in the night sky after the moon, Venus can cast shadows and can be, on rare occasions, visible to the naked eye in broad daylight. Venus lies within Earth's orbit, and so never appears to venture far from the Sun, either setting in the west just after dusk or rising in the east a bit before dawn.
Echo, explain Earth.
According to Wikipedia, Earth is the third planet from the Sun and the only astronomical object known to harbor life. According to radiometric dating estimation and other evidence, Earth formed over 4.5 billion years ago. Earth's gravity interacts with other objects in space, especially the Sun and the Moon, which is Earth's only natural satellite.
Earth. Echo, explain Mars.
According to Wikipedia, Mars is the fourth planet from the Sun and the second smallest planet in the solar system, being only larger than Mercury. In English, Mars carries the name of the Roman god of war and is often referred to as the red planet. The latter refers to the effect of the iron oxide prevalent on Mars' surface, which gives it a reddish appearance distinctive among the astronomical bodies visible to the naked eye.
Echo, explain Jupiter.
According to Wikipedia, Jupiter is the fifth planet from the Sun and the largest in the solar system. It is a gas giant with a mass 1,000th that of the Sun, or 2.5 times that of all the other planets in the solar system combined. Jupiter is one of the brightest objects visible to the naked eye in the night sky, and has been known to ancient civilizations since before recorded history.
And even top predators.
Echo. Explain Saturn.
According to Wikipedia, Saturn is the sixth planet from the Sun and the second largest in the solar system, after Jupiter. It is a gas giant with an average radius of about 9 times that of Earth. It only has 1/8 the average density of Earth. However, with its larger volume, Saturn is over 95 times more massive.
Echo. Explain Uranus.
Uranus is the seventh planet from the Sun.
Echo. Tell me about the seventh planet from the Sun.
The seventh planet by planet number in the solar system is Uranus.
Echo. Explain Neptune.
According to Wikipedia, Neptune is the eighth and farthest moon planet from the Sun. In the solar system, it is the fourth largest planet by diameter, the third most massive planet, and the densest giant planet. It is 17 times the mass of Earth, slightly more massive than its near twin Uranus. Neptune is denser and physically smaller than Uranus because its greater mass causes more gravitational compression of its atmosphere.
Echo. Tell me about the moons.
According to Wikipedia, the Moon is an astronomical body orbiting Earth and is the planet's only natural satellite. It is the fifth largest satellite in the solar system, and by far the largest among planetary satellites relative to the size of the planet that it orbits. The Moon is, after Jupiter's satellite Io, the second densest satellite in the solar system among those whose densities are known.
Echo. Tell me about Neptune.
Here's the Wikipedia article on the discovery of Neptune. The planet Neptune was mathematically predicted before it was directly observed. With a prediction by von Bavaria, telescopic observations confirming the existence of a major planet were made on the night of September 23rd to 24th, 1846, at the Berlin Observatory, by astronomer Johann Gottfried Ball, working for various calculations. It was a sensational moment of 19th century science, and dramatic confirmation of Newtonian gravitational theory. In François Arago's Axel, Bavaria had discovered a planet with the point of his pen. Would you like me to keep reading?
Yes. Continue. Echo, yes.
The discovery of Neptune led to the discovery of its moon Titan by William Lassell just 17 days later. Would you like me to keep reading?
Yes.
Section 2. Earlier observations. Neptune is too dim to be visible to the naked eye. Its apparent magnitude is never brighter than 7.7. Therefore, the first observations of Neptune were only possible after the invention of the telescope. There is evidence that Neptune was seen and reported by Galileo Galilei in 1613, Guillaume Lalande in 1795, and John Herschel in 1830, but none are known to have recognized it as a planet at the time. These two discovery observations were important in accurately determining the orbit of Neptune. Neptune would appear prominently even in early telescopes, so other true discovery observation methods are likely. Would you like me to keep reading?
Yes.
Galileo's drawings show that he observed Neptune on December 28, 1612, and again on January 27, 1613. On both occasions, Galileo mistook Neptune for a fixed star when it appeared very close to Jupiter in the night sky. Historically, it was thought that he believed it to
Each
be
car was
fruit
given a
fly,
box filled
until
with
he was
fresh
not
fruits and
credited with its
vegetables,
discovery.
courtesy of
At
the
the time
LA
of his
Bowl,
first
an
observation
upcoming
on December
NCAA
1612,
Division I
it was
bowl
still
game.
prevailing in
Here
style
at the LA
because
Bowl,
it was
we're a new bowl, new here to the community, and we've been focusing on several of these types of events throughout not only Inglewood but also the Los Angeles community. We've received an overwhelming amount of positive feedback.
A company called Melissa's Produce also donated to the giveaway.
In July 2009, University of Melbourne
Families with children received backpacks filled with school supplies.
So we know that we've been facing different challenges right now when it comes to the pandemic and different, things that have been happening recently, but having people supporting us and giving us this type of supplements to, just go through our lives, it really means a lot.
Inglewood Mayor James T. Butts says the city has been especially hard hit by the COVID-19 for the While many residents are excited about the stadium, others regularly express concerns on social media about gentrification,
Yes.
rising rents, and they've criticized the city for offering the site's developers big tax breaks instead of truly helping those in need.
$1 billion to construct and is described as the most expensive sports stadium ever built. It's scheduled to officially open next month, but likely without fans in the stadium, due to the pandemic. Next, Google Doodle is holding a contest for students, hoping the public will help them narrow down 5 artists to become finalists in the competition. We got a chance to speak with one of the artists, and stay tuned, you don't want to miss it. Keto is simple. By removing carbs, your body is forced to burn fat.
We're twinsies.
At CVS, flu shots can be free, safe, and quick, so the whole family can get them. Now at twinsies, get $5 off 20 with each free flu shot at CVS. DSW is your sneaker headquarters for the whole family. Get the coolest stuff from your favorite brands like Nike, Adidas, Converse, and Vans. Women's, men's, and kids, all in one place.
Yes.
See you soon at DSW.
In 1850, the promise was made to back you during times of plenty and during times like this. During times of plenty. At American Express, and whatever comes next. Visit
So it's nothing short than a moral abomination that in the wealthiest nation in the world, we have to be faced with and see so many struggling so profoundly with economic injustice every day. As our dear friend and great Bishop Barber has noted, before the pandemic began, there were over 140 million, mind you, 140 million poor and low-wealth people struggling just to survive, mind you, not thrive, just to survive.
Yes.
For example, you look at how, let me just read this to you real quick. Poverty affects millions of Americans of all races, ethnicities, abilities, status, and genders. But it disproportionately affects families and communities that are already marginalized. Just 8.7% of whites are poor compared with 21.2% of Black Americans and 18.3% of Latinx Americans. This means that simply by virtue of being born a person of color, one is more than twice as likely to experience poverty in the United States as their white counterparts. And we want everyone lifted out of poverty. But when you look at the disproportionate numbers of people of color, and when you look at the fact that we have not made any gains, this is just something we have to see as a reflection, once again, of systemic racism that we must tackle at the same time that we it's really beyond cruel. And I think right now we see them for who they are.
Yes.
Not only do we need the big relief bill, the HEROES bill that we passed several months ago, we also need massive public investment to take systemic racism and economic inequalities. We need to dismantle and disrupt those policies and those systems that create the inequalities. We've got to do that
Yes.
insisted that we do that. We need a living wage. And yes, I support Medicare for all. We need an end to food insecurity. Look at the lines of people who have never lived below the poverty line. Now middle income people are waiting in line just for a box of food in America. We need an expansion of Social Security. We've got to eliminate the wealth gap among communities of color and policies that treat housing as a basic human right.
And here is personally and professionally, we've confronted devastating loss, finding purpose in the darkness and inspiring others along the way to do so as well. And I can speak from experience because when my husband unexpectedly passed away, he often said, the American people have never, ever let us down, and they never will. We are in difficult, dark times, but with Joe Biden leading us, we will conquer any challenge. When I gave my remarks the other day, I started off by saying in a history class in the future, children will be learning about this moment that we're in today.
Yes.
And that they'll be learning about our pain and our grief and our worry, but that they will also be learning about a man named Joe Biden who helped restore dignity and decency to our government and integrity to our democracy. And they'll learn about how we, as individuals, as a collective, as a united party and people, conquered a pandemic, stood up against racial injustice, and also worked to build our economy back better.
Yes.
And they'll learn about his leadership and how he gave that young generation that was focused on last night a fighting chance.
So how did this process all start? I mean, how long has it been?
I first applied at the beginning of the year. I submitted my doodle, I think, March. And then Corona happened, so all the Google dates got pushed. The finalists were supposed to be announced. But just last week, Google had delivered a box to me saying that I had won Louisiana and that I was in the running for the big win, basically.
Yes.
How did you feel when you found out that news?
Yeah, it still feels surreal. I mean, it doesn't feel real. Even when I get support, on social media, even that doesn't really feel real.
Let's talk about the actual drawing. Tell me where your inspiration came from. I mean, how long did it take?
Planning always takes the longest. I feel like the whole month of March, I was Googling what kindness means and the different definitions. And most of the inspiration was me thinking about how people can be kind even when they don't have anything. So the free options of kindness and also the simplest form. So with the first D, there's mother, her child, and I think that's the most natural form of love, and that's when you're with your family, you're always kind to them in some way or another. And then with one of the O's, it's like a lady hugging a man and he's crying, and I think when you show love to people who don't seem like they love themselves, that's a really powerful form of kindness. And with the second G, it was a woman giving a heart to someone who seems angry at her. And I think that's the most important form of kindness. I think that's the most difficult to give out, but I think those people need kindness the most.
For you, I know that there's a possibility of a $30,000 scholarship. I mean, what are your plans if you were to get the award?
Right now, in terms of colleges, I'm looking at Loyola. I'm also looking at the Art Institute in Chicago, but if I win $30,000 and that, I feel like that opens me up to a whole lot more colleges that are so out of my pay range. But if I place in my age range, then I become national winner to win the $30,000.
How do you feel?
I feel overwhelmed, a good kind of overwhelmed, but I'm a high school student. I'm trying to keep my artwork to the people who want to see it. So yeah, I feel like I
Yes.
feel really busy this week. It's a busy week. I want to be that point of inspiration, and I know I have those points of inspiration in my life. And yeah, I would love to be like someone that like a black kid could look up to and be like, oh, she won this thing, so I can definitely do it. You know.
I'll tell you, she is going places, and she is very talented. I'm so glad I got the chance to speak to her. Today is the last day to vote, so if you can go ahead and go on that Google Doodle link and be able to go ahead and vote for her under Louisiana.